Hello, everyone, and welcome to another usually scheduled or, typically scheduled Sunday talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. Every Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, currently daylight time. Thank you for joining us, everyone around the world who is here currently and who will be watching on the replay on YouTube. We are so happy to have you join us, whether it's for the first time or for the millionth time. We love having you here. So we do need to do a little bit of a spiel, of course, our YouTube spiel. And Mushtaq, why don't you do that today?
Why don't I do the spiel today? All right, folks.
Oh, by
Thanks
the way,
for being here.
we should introduce ourselves, right? I'm one of your two hosts, Noor Kyle,
And I'm not Noor Kyle, which means I'm Mushtaq Ali.
who is also going to do the spiel.
I am going to do the spiel. Can I do the spiel now? I guess so. All right. So, welcome if this is your first time here. Welcome if you've been coming here every week to see these. We love having you, and it would warm the cockles of our hearts if you would hit that subscribe button and subscribe to the channel, because that will allow us, believe it or not, to produce even more groovy content and eventually get any commercials that YouTube puts on our videos against our will and wishes. We're almost there. When I checked this morning, we were at 965 subscribers, which is pretty exciting considering that we have done this entirely organically. We don't advertise, we don't spend money. It's all word of mouth and the esoteric YouTube algorithm that has done this. And because people find what we have to say interesting or amusing, which is equally good. So we would love it if you would subscribe to us. And we would love it if you like this video. It's important to get a bunch of likes on the video, I'm told, because that gets us up in YouTube's algorithm, and then more people can find us and either love us or hate us as they choose. Okay.
Nob's here, no worries, I got it.
I got it. I think that's Zainab. Anyway, back to the spiel. So, hitting the like button for this video would be a great help to us. And there is a guaranteed amusing prize with every like. We don't know what it is. We couldn't tell you what it is, but you will receive it from the universe for liking this video. And last but not least, we've got like, subscribe, comment. Your comments are so valuable. And lately they've been really good. There have been some really smart, intelligent comments on the stuff that we've said. And I love seeing them because it means, one, we have a really good audience. Two, you've been listening to what we've been saying. And three, you're thinking about it and commenting from your own experience and adding to our knowledge base. So your comments are greatly appreciated. I know I owe one person a reply still, and we've been so busy I haven't gotten to it. But so, like, subscribe, comment. It's the trifecta of YouTube.
Yeah.
So, there we have it. The spiel.
The spiel, yes. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, we are going to be doing a revisit today. But this is not just simply, a rehashing of things that we've discussed previously. We have
There'll be a
found,
little of that.
well, that's natural, but what I mean is it's important to cover these things when issues like what we encountered this week come up. And let's talk a little bit about that, shall we? So first of all, the topic this week is going to be self-remembering. And this is a practice that we talk about relatively frequently here because it is such an important part of what we do. And why don't we can start there, and then we can, tie in what we learned about this week, Mushtaq.
Yeah. So, self-remembering is a term that Gurdjieff used. And it is one of two things that he talks about. He talks about self-observation and self-remembering. He got these. This is my theory. Nobody can prove this or disprove it, but I'm pretty sure that these are two of three Sufi practices that I learned way back in the day. And they are important. And so we have taught, one of the first videos we ever did was on the three, self-observation, self-remembering, and self-witnessing, which are the three practices from the Sufi point of view. And what do you want to say about them, Noor?
First of all, they are not super secret, first of all.
No, they aren't secret at all.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that anyone who is interested in learning can learn, and with a little practice, be able to do. There's nothing particularly esoteric and spooky about them. Yeah.
No, and you can look this up. In Arabic, this is called muraqabeh. For those of you who are with us, I'm going to put it. There's the Arabic, also the Farsi.
Yeah, and I'm going to type it out in...
You type it out, please. Yeah.
There we go.
And this is a word that it means to control, to monitor, to surveil, to observe, to have oversight over, to watch, to keep an eye on. So, this is what the word means. And it's usually translated, when it's translated into English, like if you put this in Google and said, what is this word? It would come back as meditation most of the time. Even though it is not what Westerners mean by meditation. And self-remembering is a pretty good translation of what it is. Now, if you look at 10 different Sufi groups, they will give you 10 different definitions of what meditation, what muraqabeh, how it's done. And most of those are theological. You know, it's like you're meditating on God and all of this. In the tariqah that Noor and I are from, that's not what it means. It means literally to keep an eye on yourself. And it's really simple to do. And there's nothing secret about it. So I am now going to teach all of you and anybody else who's listening exactly how to do this. Free of charge. You don't have to swear any oaths. You don't have to take vows of secrecy. You don't have to send us money. You could send us money if you wanted, but it's not required. And this is how it's done. First, I like to take a breath. That just reminds me I'm in my body. And then I take my awareness, the part of me that is usually looking out into the world, and I turn it backwards, reflexive. And I notice me being aware. I observe myself, I observe my witness. Not the talking in the head that happens, not pictures, Not any of those things, just my awareness being here. And I have my attention on my attention. When you first do this, you'll be able to hold it for a whole tenth of a second. And then you'll be distracted, and then you come back and you do it again. Self-remembering puts you in the present moment as yourself, as a witness in the world. It tends to be a little bit more inward. And self-observation is outward. It's looking at the objects given to consciousness. And then self-witnessing transcends both of those in a particular way. We'll talk about that later, because today we're focusing on self-remembering. So, that's all there is to it. You just experience your own awareness. When you do it, the voices in your head become silent. You don't want to lose track of the room completely, because you can put yourself into a trance doing this, and that is antithetical to what you're doing. You want to stay awake. You want to stay present. You want to be in this moment and witness yourself being in this moment. The Yoga Sutras say, when you are this, when the turnings and twistings of the chittavritti, the mind, the monkey mind, when they are silent, then the witness is in its proper place as that which perceives the universe. And that's what you're going for here, just to be the witness to your own being. When Descartes finally got to the cogito, when he got through all of his doubting, what he was left with is just this being. When all of the Advaita guys got to this point, what they were left with is, oh, here is my being. My being is here. It's an infinite regress. As far back as I look, there it is. And it's me. I'm me looking out at me looking in. The words don't really do it justice, but the sensation is pretty easy to find. Does that make sense?
Let's take a moment for questions. Ailey has one. I'm not quite clear on what is being asked here. Is it the as to be present? Would you like to speak about that, Ailey? I'm not sure I understand the as in this question.
Well, I often exercise just to be present, to be in my body, and not, and also listen, as now to listen to the talk, but just stop the inner chittering, just to be here and to get all the impression inside. So is that the same as self?
It's pretty close, but there's one little extra element, which is to be aware of yourself being here. So you're not just observing the existence, you're not just being in the room, but your awareness is on yourself being present.
Yeah, and yourself is it, if you make contact with that in this attitude, is that you make contact with your essence, and is that
Yes,
essence is
yes,
growing? Okay,
yes,
and that's the way to become what that have you said in your early talks. A man should become adult, and
yes.
I understand how to grow your essence.
Mm-hmm. You are hitting the nail right on the head.
Thank you.
Right. Thanks. I'm glad I had you elaborate on that question. Thanks, Ailey. How about anyone
And
else? Yeah.
yeah, don't everybody talk at once.
Yeah. Jefferson, if you don't mind, how are you doing?
I was just sorting if I should raise my hand or unmute my
Oh
mic.
yeah,
So
you can just
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Unmuting your mic is raising your hand.
okay,
you have
great.
few enough people that works well. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so being aware that I mean, it's easy to kind of go into conceptual questions, and that can be fun. Um, the one that came to me was, if it's done properly, what's not available? I mean, if for those of you who practice it, could you speak to it? Is when that's happening well, is there a whole range that's not available?
No,
Experience.
everything is available. Some things are set behind for a moment. All of my memories are readily available, likely more available than usual. All of my abilities to future pace are available. I am just not using them at the moment so that I can just be here and be present. If I need any of those things, they're there. If I need access to my ability to spin a story, it's sitting right there. I just don't pick it up until I need it. We often call this the default state. In one of the old Sanskrit teachings, it's called Shanta. Shanta comes from the same root as Shanti, which means peace. And it is the one of the primal states of complete peace, tranquility, relaxation, where nothing is stirring, like a calm lake or pond or bucket of water or any of those things. Yeah.
Nice, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it was a contrasting question. I was just wondering if there was a from an experiential place, there was like, well, certain, because I mean, I'm thinking about, because we're saying remembering self and observing the self, it's like a duality has become unified in the practice, or that's kind of where I was going. Like, okay, so
Yeah.
my typical fragmented self is defragged, or is unifying with essence, I guess, as the other man was
Yeah.
speaking about.
Yeah. The biggest problem with this is that there are really no words that accurately describe it. At least not in English. That's why I tend to refer to Sanskrit and Farsi and Arabic a lot and then try and define those words for you. But it is imperfect. I can tell you from a phenomenological perspective, if I am in the state of self-remembering right now, I will notice that first of all, I'm aware of my own being. I'm aware of me speaking to you. I'm aware of the room that I'm in. I'm aware of my body. I'm aware that my body has become still. The usual habitual movements that the ego contains begin to quiet down. I can feel my face relax. And I am just present. And
So
then I hear
much
the tuba and I go, oh boy,
visioning.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 Because I mean, some people may feel that this practice is more easily felt into by starting with the eyes closed, but ideally, you're doing it with the eyes open so that you're not entering a trance state in which all
yeah.
of this just kind of ambient sensory stuff is being cut off from you.
Yeah, and I learned this eyes open because my teacher at the time, if he saw somebody with their eyes closed and they were going into trance, he'd throw something at them.
Yeah.
Wouldn't usually be terribly heavy, you know, like a watered up piece of paper or something. But if you're aware, you just reach out and you catch it, and then everybody's goes, ooh, ah. But if you're not, it goes, thunk.
I guess I just want to accommodate people who today have a really hard time focusing and calming down, and we all have to start somewhere. But it's great to work up to being able to do this consistently with our senses open.
Yes. And sometimes you use your breath to help, to get
Yeah.
you started. This is not a breathing practice, but breathing helps you center yourself enough to do it.
Plenty about that, how we talk about the active exhale and the passive inhale, extending that exhale so that the body is able to relax into settledness.
Ailey asks if it's like a form of, that's Zen meditation, right? Where are you, Ailey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of years training on certain kinds of Buddhist meditation and also
Yeah.
Dzogchen, and you do it with open eyes. And I do it a lot when I have to travel in Holland, waiting for the train, and just stay there. And I start with the breath, and I just go go deep inside, and I'm only focusing when does a train coming, and I also put my gut feeling if there is a danger is coming. That's the two things what I do with
Yeah.
that kind of
Then,
meditation.
yeah, then I would say it's definitely in the same family, likely first cousins.
Okay,
It's a little bit different, but if you were doing what you're describing, it wouldn't hurt.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. And we have another new person, Rishpa Singh.
Ciao. Yeah, Rashad, we've had in our comments before. Welcome. It's so
Yeah.
good to see you here live. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Thanks.
Yeah.
And how would you prefer that we pronounce your name? What would you prefer that we call you?
I think you said it correctly the first time. Like it was Rishabh.
Rashad. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for welcoming me.
Happy to have you. All right. Awesome. Does anybody else have any other questions or thoughts or experiences with this that they might like to share? See some heads wiggling. David, do you have any questions? Are you feeling pretty confident?
What was the context for the talk? The cult?
Yeah, we're gonna get to
Yeah,
that.
we're going to get into that. I wanted to touch on this first because I want you to have a sense of basically how easy it is to teach somebody how to do this. Now, you can learn it in 10, 15 minutes. It will take you a couple of years to really master it.
And that's with consistent, you know, giving it a try and committing to it, just as with anything.
I had a comment.
Yeah, Jonathan, sure.
So, as I was practicing this, as you were describing what we should be doing, my thoughts, my internal dialogue went quiet. But I could hear your voice speaking. but I couldn't really understand what you were saying. I had to, in order for me to process what you were saying, I had to step out slightly from the state to process what you were saying, to understand it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you let yourself slip below the level of linguistic abstraction. What you can do with this, and it's perfectly okay as long as you are safe in a room by yourself. The trick is to be able to allow your unconscious mind to process things like language for you, so you can know without thinking about it.
Now that sounds a little more complex.
Yeah, and it's that's why it takes a couple years to actually begin to master this. But you still did good.
Thanks for sharing that, Jonathan, because I think other people might wonder the same thing. How you doing, Lolita? Okay. Okay. How about you, Zainab? Oh,
Yeah,
Jayesh. Yeah.
yeah.
I'll next you, Zainab, but I just saw Jayesh unmuted, so.
So I was thinking about Jefferson's question that what it does not include, this self-remembering. So I thought that if I am truly established in the state of self-remembering, then identification is missed. And if I am identified, then self-remembering is missed. So it's opposite.
Yes, it is. And when you're in the state of self-remembering, your impressions are, the impressions that you take in are very, very strong. I find if I need to remember something, like I meet a person and I need to remember their name, I make sure that I am in my state of self-remembering when I ask them for their name. And then it sticks with me. If I'm not, then I'm going to need to hear their name 5 or 6 times before it sticks in my head.
Hi, can I ask a question on this?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so are even like the feelings magnified when you're in that state, like 100 times or more? Like you can feel things more deeply when you are in self-remembering?
Yes, and you are not identified with the feelings. You are not attached to the feelings, but they move through you. If you don't feel things, then you are disconnected from your conscience, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you can feel very strongly in a state of self-remembering. You can deeply take in the impressions of the feelings, and at the same time, you are not identified with the feelings, so that you are not attached to them.
Right.
So if they
Got
get
it.
sticky, that's identifying with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Thank you.
That's for sure. Okay, Zainab.
No questions at the moment.
Any
No
answers?
questions, yeah?
You might have an answer, Zainab.
As you said, it's more inward practice.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean when you're in the passive state, it's harder to self-remember when you're actively in the world? So
It is harder in that when you're active in the world will try and distract you. This is why practice is so necessary. And this is where self-witnessing comes in, where you can mushahada, where you can connect yourself and the world together as one field. But yeah, you can move in the world in a state of self-remembering. And once you get the hang of it, it's a lot of fun because you begin to see things more as they are and less as you have always imagined them to be. One of the fun things for me is, I walk to the store in a state of self-remembering. And I notice all sorts of things that I may have never noticed before. I notice things that are different as opposed to ignoring it all and just pretending that it's all exactly the same. Because it's never the same walk twice. That sounds a little like Heraclitus. It's never the same walk to the store twice. So, who have we? Boy, we are getting all manner of wonderful new people in. So, who have we not heard from? We haven't heard from Aaron, have we? Aaron, what do you think?
After the blessing of seeing his beautiful face.
Yeah. Aaron, I may get you a new camera for your Christmas present this year.
Still hang out with us in your PJs, I promise.
Of course, he may be off making popcorn. We don't know. All right.
Well, Jefferson.
Something just popped up for me. I mean, it's a bit it's coming from psychological land, but I was just considering that it might be described as a harmonizing of the conscious and the unconscious. I mean, that might be limited.
That is definitely an aspect of it. Yes. If you are in a good state of self-remembering, your unconscious should be working with you rather than at odds with you.
Yeah, if we want to use that model, I think that's fair to say. Yeah. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I say that is because I've been contemplating individuation, self-individuation, and kind of from, I don't know if that was birthed by Jung, that word anyway.
Yeah, that's where I first learned the term, was from Jung. So,
and I've also been doing a lot of contemplation on culting, not to try to preempt your direction, but that's why I asked about harmonizing, because I'm curious about how that helps the self to come to be in the midst of the many.
Yeah. That is kind of relevant too.
Yeah, it is very relevant because one of the wonderful things that your unconscious does for you is it gives you intuition. And it is incredibly important for every person to learn to listen to their intuition, because it will oftentimes tell them very important things, like get away from this person right now, in certain senses. It might be saying that about us. You never know. We were kind of crazy, I have to admit. But, or it might say, go down this street, not that street today. And if you are in a good state of self-remembering, you'll notice that and you'll listen to it. And we're going to get more deeply into that shortly.
Yeah.
Aaron did make a comment.
Face with Aaron. Yeah, Aaron says, it makes me think of feeling comfortable and familiar and novel at the same time, if that makes sense. And yeah, it does. I feel like there is this kind of I guess what was coming up for me as Mushtaq was talking about it was kind of just like the sense of wonderment in a familiar environment that can come when we allow ourselves to see it through fresh eyes, to state the cliche. That resonates, yeah.
Yeah.
Hello to our new visitor. I just want to say hi to them. I know that they have not been here for the first part of this talk, so I'm not going to put them on the spot, but welcome. We are very happy to have you.
Yeah, and we'll put you on the spot later.
Yeah. So, how do you feel, Mushtaq, about, well, I mean, Shuri, do you want to chime in at all?
What was coming up for me is that there have been many moments in my life where I've been told to go and seek different experiences, and they get more outlandish, you know, like jumping out of a plane or something like this, or rock climbing, something that will kind of wake me up out of my inertia. And then it got to the point where they were just distractions. And as you say, when you're self-remembering, a walk down the street is never the same as you do it the same, like the practice over and over again. There's different things to notice. The experience of being is actually richer, and it's not boring. So people are a bit worried about that. So I find that the capacity to trust the instinct can only come if you're not distracted. So when you overthink something all the time, when you're doing a physical practice of some kind, and for me, like it's in tennis, if I overthink a shot, I can't do the shot properly. But if I just go into that flow of what I'm meant to do, how I'm supposed to make a choice about how I move my arm, my leg, my body, it's quite different, and it's quite thrilling, actually. So the instinct of when you look back and you know that you've made the appropriate choice. The appropriate choice doesn't mean that it was going to be comfortable. And that for me is an important thing. We are always seeking comfort, but that's not necessarily very helpful. And just being able to sit in just this moment and that awareness for me, and trusting the instinct, is having less and less distraction, less overthinking. The end.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Bravo. Yes, very nice. Thanks, Shuri. That was great. All right.
I have one question, if I may ask.
Yes.
I observed that when I do self-remembering consciously, it has one kind of intensity. And I remember I had a couple of accidents or shocks in my life. And in that precise moment, the way I experience the energy of self-remembering, it is totally different. It's very powerful. So why it is so, and what is the difference? How one can do the conscious practice to elevate that state to that level when I met with an accident or shock in my life?
Yeah. With shocks like that, I don't think of that as self-remembering so much as just being shocked into awakeness, which is in some ways a much more powerful state. Self-remembering is a more gentle state because it doesn't require, say, being thrown off a horse or falling off a cliff or any of the 10,000 things that might force that state upon you.
It literally means meditation, doesn't it, in a way?
What?
The Arabic term that often gets used for this.
Yeah, it's usually translated as meditation.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, but it has a somewhat different meaning because
Got it, yeah.
yeah, it has this sense of observing the self.
Well, the reason why I mentioned that is because speaking to what you're saying about it being kind of a gentle practice,
Yeah.
it is not about a shock to the system in this particular practice. However, that awake state is what it is. So you can encounter that through shocks or through a gentle meditative practice such as this.
Yeah, and the shocks give you a much more powerful state, but it's hard to hold on to it. I don't like administering those kinds of shocks to students because you can get caught up in them. You can keep trying to get back to them. I am much fonder of a gentler, more incremental approach.
Is that I hope that's useful to you, Jayesh. Great. Cool. Vita, do you have anything you'd like to share? Nope. All right. Okay, so do we want to talk about culty stuff now?
Yeah, we should talk about culty stuff because that's what brought us to this topic.
Yeah.
So, as you may or may not know, I'm fond of a podcast called A Little Bit Culty, which is put on once a week by two people who were involved with the Nexium group, which was a big-ass cult. And they do talks and interviews with other cult people and people who understand what cult being caught up in a cult is like, and all of this kind of stuff.
Mechanics of how cults come into being and how they work and all of that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this one was particularly interesting because I saw the slide for it, and it had an Enneagram behind it. And there are a couple of definite culty groups that have hung Gurdjieff on their name. The Fellowship of Friends is one who have tenuous connections to Gurdjieff and some pretty weird shit that goes on up there. And this was another one.
Gurdjieff? Yeah.
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 And this was another one. The person who was being interviewed was a guy by the name of Spencer Schneider, and he had just written a book called Manhattan Cult Story.
Yeah.
My Unbelievable True Story of Sex, Crimes, Chaos, and Survival. And he was, there was a cult, he encountered it in New York. The cult started in San Francisco, and it started connected to the Fellowship of Friends group, or coming from the same place, which I found interesting. He didn't mention that in the interview, but I did some research later. And it was run by this woman who was an actress who had some bit parts. And it was weird how he described it. It was completely secretive. You literally took oaths of secrecy. You couldn't talk with anybody outside of the meetings. You couldn't date a girl or a guy who was involved with it without the express permission of the teacher.
And it was interesting how they trolled for new members.
Yeah, they trolled for new members. But the thing that got me was he was talking about all of these people telling him when he was remembering himself and when he wasn't. And because they never actually taught anybody how to do self-remembering, it could be anything for them. So they would use it
in a very circular way. So they would be like, okay, well, one of the practices we're going to do is we're going to remember ourselves. And then someone would be daring enough to ask, okay, what is that and how do we do it? And then they'd be like, you remember yourself. And for someone who maybe has a little bit more involvement with the practice, that might make some sense. But if you're completely new to it, it is meaningless. And they would shame people for asking questions to get them to elaborate on what the hell they were talking about and how you were supposed to do it.
And they would shame people for not being in states of self-remembering, even though whatever they were defining as self-remembering in the moment had nothing to do with the practice.
Right. So eventually people would be cowed into just withdrawing into themselves, and then the authority figure would be like, now you're doing it, great, wonderful, thumbs up. So the person who has been trying to learn what the hell they're supposed to be doing has just been trained to shut the fuck up and do nothing and ask no questions and pursue no further information, because every time they do, it bites them in the ass.
And from the description of this, it sounded so incredibly toxic, and I'm trying to imagine how this could happen. The people who were the teachers knew virtually nothing about the work from any description that I could get.
Yeah, so they're using a lot of the vocabulary, much of which we also use, like the work and self-remembering and things of that nature. And yet they had no idea how to actually do these things in a way that had any real substance whatsoever.
Yeah, basically you got to serve the teacher and be obedient. And pay lots and lots of money.
Yeah, I mean, it became these terms became, the means of abuse, essentially. So I see that Ailey is unmuted. What's up?
Yes, Ailey.
Yeah, Mr. Collin, I'm very surprised about your opinion about fellow friends, because I have a book of Robert Earl Burton. He wrote a book about self-remembering, and he's the founding father of the fellow friends. So I'm astonished.
Do you know that he regularly seduces young men?
No,
not gay men, but young straight men to have sex with him. This is not hearsay. This is not somebody's imagination. We have lots and lots of people who have come forward saying, this is something that happened to me.
Okay, because I must say, the book he write about self-remembering, I learned a lot of it, and I see a lot information about the teaching of Gurdjieff also, and
my impression of him is my impression of him is he doesn't know all that much about the teachings of Gurdjieff, except for what Ouspensky wrote. A lot of what I've seen from him looks like it's cribbed right out of The Fourth Way or In Search of the Miraculous. And there are a couple of really good documentaries on this group now that pretty much tell you what's really going on. And it's really very, very creepy.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, this has come up for discussion a couple times with us privately, so we just want to be a bit more assertive in addressing that. So, Ailey, it's nothing against you. It's just one of the things,
No. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know the old story, right? So there was a guy who was a phony sheikh, and he had been a phony sheikh for years. And then one day he realized that he was a complete fraud and that he really knew nothing. And he called his second in command to him and he said, I just realized that I'm a complete fraud and I've been teaching these people all this time and I don't know jack shit. And his second in command says, shh, don't say anything because 3 more of your students just achieved enlightenment. So if you got value from Patterson's book or from Burton's book, that says more about you than it does Burton. That says that you were looking for the right things and you found them there. So that's what I would say to that. That's also true if you get anything from Noor or I. It's not because we have anything special. It's because if we say something useful and you apply it and you learn something from it, that's your own fault.
I totally agree. That's your fault, not ours. But yeah. So yeah, if you got something out of it, great. And at the same time, I think when these things come up that we have allegations that are backed up by evidence that people have been hurt by certain teachers, I think it's a learning experience in and of itself.
Yeah. And so go ahead.
I think you have also have talks about chief features. But how I listen to you and what I've read about what he had written, he didn't work on his chief features. He just continues going, remembering himself. But it is for me a kind of spiritual bypass what he did.
Yeah, that would be a good description. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
and he's got a really good gig. I mean, he's got people paying him ridiculous amounts of money. He has them gifting him with art and everything. He has a great place up north where he's got a vineyard and all of this stuff. And he's got all of these young boys being imported from outside of the country. And life is good for him. Yeah. So, you know, if people want that, more power to them. But I want to make sure that there is something out there. So maybe somebody is going to discover this and go, oh, that's what self-remembering is. And they'll apply it to themselves. And then one of these people who tries to gaslight them is going to fail at the gaslighting. That's my hope anyway.
Yeah, I mean, because it was, and not only that, but it's sad because for those of us who have taken the time and have had the opportunity to learn what self-remembering is in a way that is healthy, that is effective, that, you know, actually comes to make logical sense or, you know, intuitive sense through practice, to miss out on that because of the ego of the people who are lording a false sense of authority over you and tricking you out of your own agency and your own sense of self-awareness, your ability to assess yourself, your sense of agency, and then using those things to manipulate you and harm you and confuse you. Perhaps even going as far as to like rob you blind through your coerced consent, quote unquote.
Yeah. Another interesting thing that came out in the discussion was the idea that in the fourth way, all of the elder students know more than you do, so you must listen to them about what they think rather than going with what you think. Now, this is a little bit terrifying for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that it is completely antithetical to what Gurdjieff taught.
Mm-hmm.
It does not matter how long somebody has been in the work. That doesn't mean that they have achieved any kind of self-development. And we see that, I used to see that all the time in various Sufi groups where people had just got to where they were comfortable and that was it. And
Doing
this is,
the
yeah.
spiritual bypassing that Ailey's
Yeah.
mentioning. Yeah.
And this is what happens when a teacher dies without appointing a successor, is that the students who have not woken up get together and they go, oh, who's been in the work longest? You, Fred, you're now the leader. Fred is a complete moron, right? He knows nothing, but he's been there the longest. And becomes the leader, and in a few years it all falls apart. Or Fred
As
becomes
the-
a complete tyrant.
The shiniest charisma and all that. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I say that, this goes for Noor and I as well. Just because we've been in the work for a while doesn't mean we know everything. I tried to get the infinite knowledge package, right, and it was not available, which is sad. So I don't know everything. She doesn't know everything. She knows more than I do, but none of us know everything. And it is important as teachers that we remember that. And if you get a teacher who claims to know everything, they're lying to you. Only the infinite knows everything. And you cannot fit the infinite inside a human body. The infinite can touch, but you can't fit all of it in here. So no matter how good you think you are, you ain't that good. I'm mostly saying that to me. I say that to myself every day. Because I've seen enough of these assholes that I never would become one, if I can help it. But you can give me all your money. I would take all of your money happily.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I, we support each other in that, in the sense that we have different struggles when it comes to this stuff, but we keep each other in check.
Yeah, and we talked about that. I think it was the last talk or the talk before, the idea of who are you accountable to? Somebody asked this of another one of these great New Age teachers, and they were incredibly incensed to even be asked that. How dare you ask me who I can be, who I'm accountable to? Because would you ask the greatest tennis player in the world who they're accountable to for their game? And that's a stupid response. I point out to you that while Mike Tyson was the best boxer in the world at one time, his coach, Cus D'Amato, who taught him how to box, would not have lasted in the ring 2 minutes with him, probably not 1 minute. But Tyson, who was the best, was accountable to his coach. So a real teacher is accountable. They are accountable to their teachers, living and dead. They are accountable to their partners, their khalifas. So I'm accountable to Noor. She's accountable to me. She has the job of calling me on any bullshit that I see, that she sees. I'll call myself on the bullshit that I see. And, most importantly, we are accountable to our students.
Is exactly what this group failed to understand.
Yes. And if you find a group where the teacher is not accountable to the students, then you might want to wander off and be someplace else. And if you find a group where the students are afraid to ask a teacher a hard question, then that's probably not a good place to be either.
And
Y'all understand what I mean by that?
Like, this is different from the social anxiety that rises up within you. This is like, someone is going to yell at me. I'm going to be punished, ostracized, alienated, rejected for asking a question. That is not cool, never okay.
Yeah.
Jefferson.
Yeah. So, you were listing off some of the characteristics of this particular group, and the shaming people was spoken several times, and I've had the cultic experience, and my orientation is that shame is the base currency of cultic relating. That's really that's the key currency that is being exchanged. So how dare you start this call with application? How dare you? So yeah, this is a beautiful, beautiful conversation from the shoes that I've walked in, and yeah, thank you.
That makes me feel, you may have just made my whole damn night right there.
And I am sorry that you have been through that shit, but thanks for your bravery and sharing.
Oh, I mean, gold in hindsight, it's treasures upon treasures, truly.
Stand that, yeah. Thanks, Jefferson. Yeah. That means a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And Levita points out something very important. This is people think of this as a cliche, but it's a true cliche.
So she says, yeah, if you want to know who has power over you, ask yourself, who are you not allowed to question? I like that. You mentioned that before, and I think it's such a great thing for us to remember and to really just like hammer that in. If you want to know who has power over you, ask yourself, who are you not allowed to question? Yeah. Levita.
My experience. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My recent experience with this type of thing. This is hindsight talking, but I spent a lot of time in my head trying to figure out what to do to make it work so I didn't have to leave. And now I realize the minute I find myself trying to make it work, it's time to get out.
Yep.
You know, because usually if you talk to somebody and there's an issue, you talk, you work it out, and everybody goes on. But when you're trying to make it work and the other person's not listening to you, it's just.
Yeah, and you're trying to accommodate how much that sucks. Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sorry you had to go through that too.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes there's a price to pay for walking away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold that thought, Mushtaq. Price to pay for walking away. Levita, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that, and I'm trying to remember the exact quote because it's quoted in the Christian Bible, but it's not used the way I'm about to use it. But cult leaders frequently are of the group, but they're not. They're in the group, but not of the group.
Mm.
So they have all these rules and regs, but not for them.
Yeah.
And when you call them out and you say, "Oh, well, what about?" It's like pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yep, that is true.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
Yeah.
That is often the way it is, and it sounds like that was the way with the school. Like they didn't even really have a name.
They call themselves school. Not even the school, just school.
Yeah. So that was the name of the cult.
The book is out in hardbound and in Kindle right now, and it will be out in audiobook on Monday or Tuesday on the 5th. It's called Manhattan Cult Story. My unbelievable true story. Actually, I'm just going to put this in.
We can put it in the video notes, I guess. Too.
Yeah, I'm going to put it in the notes here, and I'm going to put
Facebook
it.
Yeah. This isn't an advertisement, but if we want to see what like a toxic fourth way, quote unquote, fourth way communities, like this is probably going to be a pretty good example of that.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to find it educational, Mushtaq and I, and anybody else who feels up for checking it out.
Yeah.
But Mushtaq, I know that you mentioned, and I want to touch on that really quickly.
Yeah.
You're saying like there's a price to pay for walking away.
Yeah. And that price is you can lose all your friends. You can lose your family
Yeah.
if you're involved in a cult. And that's one of the things that keep people bound to it. Because in cult land, if you walk away from the group, you get ostracized. And everybody's forbidden to speak to you because you are unclean and all of this.
Don't exist anymore.
Yeah. And it's brutal. And listen to Leah Remini's podcast on Scientology if you want to hear all about the cost of that particular thing, or the Jehovah's Witnesses, or any of that stuff. But
FLDS.
yeah, all of these things. And none of them are the work. One of the very first talks we ever did, back when we didn't even have Zoom to talk with, we were like, God, using Facebook and
Facebook Live and
Facebook
Google.
Live and Google, and it was horrible and terrible and really, really bad and incredibly amateur, but the material is good. And one of the first talks that we ever did was called Vertical versus Horizontal Teaching, because we want people to understand what a real school does, which is horizontal teaching, and what a phony school does, or a museum school does, which is vertical teaching. Great leader on the top, everybody else below. That's vertical teaching. But the problem with that is that true communication only happens between equals. True communication does not happen between masters and slaves. If you're in a hierarchy, you will never tell the person at the top the truth. And they will never hear the truth because everybody's trying to keep them happy. So we've created the nine-sided circle under the auspices of our teachers and our school to be a horizontal school. We're all equal here. There is nobody here that's above anybody else. And that's important to know. And if you need somebody to be above you, there are plenty of people who will do that, just not here.
Even pay them to do it.
Yeah. So that's that is why we got to, I had better go over self-remembering again. Even though we've done a couple of talks on it, I wanted to make it just really succinct and clear. This is how you do this. Here it is. It didn't cost you anything to learn it. You can apply it anywhere, and go with God. Take this. Use it. It's all yours.
Secrets out.
Secrets out, yes. I feel like I should be wearing one of those masks, you know. When I was a kid in the comic books, there was Master Kung Fu, right? For $4.95, he would send you the special secret stuff that he wasn't allowed to teach, and he had to wear the mask because people were out to get him and everything. That could be me. I could wear a mask.
Sneaky.
Yeah. The Secrets of Enlightenment for only $4.95. No stamps.
All right. So do we have any oh yeah, Ailey, what's up?
I have a question, also connected with how Robert Earl Burton wrote this book. I'm to do self-remembering, to do it very well. you've also to work on your chief features. But how do you have to do that? I don't know what my chief features are.
Okay. Remember I said there were three things? One of them is self-observation.
Yeah.
You use self-observation to work on your chief feature. And you use the Enneagram to help you with that. And once you can determine what your chief feature is using the Enneagram as a tool, then there are ways to work on it. It's pretty straightforward. Nor maybe we should do talks on this. I know we've done something sometime in the past, but
I'll make
it
a
might
note.
be,
Yeah.
make a note because it might be time for this to come around again.
Okay.
Now, what we're not talking about is the Enneagram of personality because that's a bastardization of the chief feature idea, but that kind of gives you a hint.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, not something we can give a pat response to, but that's a great, you know, starting point. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, that's like a couple of talks at least. Sachin, if I am pronouncing your name correctly, have you got any thoughts? Any wisdom for us?
Namaste, I'm from India.
Hi.
Well, welcome.
Thank you. I am regularly practicing meditation and yoga exercises and refining exercises. I'm connected with Madhavpur Ashram, Shri Rajan Bhai Vakil and his teachings.
Okay.
And
I know him. He's an incredibly nice guy. I like him a lot.
yes, and I'm just interested in Gurdjieff's works. I'm not very familiar with it. But just I read the Facebook page and I thought that I should join this meeting to learn something. So I just want to know that are there some basic simple techniques which you can tell that I can put in practice?
Yes. When this video goes up on YouTube, watch the first part because the first part is all about a technique that anybody can use for self-remembering.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I will do it.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us all the way from India. I know that it's early there. We have, as you may notice, we have a couple of your fellow countrymen here.
Yes.
And I appreciate people who are willing to get up early in the morning and such to talk with us.
Thank you very much.
So this is something I ask everyone when they're here for the first time. What would you like us to call you, and how would you like us to pronounce it?
My name is Sachin, as sir pronounced correctly. Thank you.
Awesome. Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Yay. Wonderful. Do we have any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, I just think I mean, for me, with what I've been through, the topic is so, it's so rich. And just in reflection of the way you carried this conversation out and the first exercise being, an antithesis to colting is really beautiful and poetic. And so I'm grateful.
I'm so glad that you feel that way, because I don't think we knew exactly what our strategy was going to be going into this, but organically, I think Mushtaq and I both felt, okay, we better do the exercise first so that when we talk about this concept of depriving people of understanding by not being willing to engage with their questions and instead choosing to shame them, I mean, it makes more sense to talk about that once we've gone over what this was that they were trying to talk about and just weren't succeeding in any meaningful way. So I'm glad that this structure was useful. Yeah.
Yeah, and having somebody who has gone through this is really useful for us.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. I could talk for hours.
Good. We might get you to talk for hours.
You know, when the time is right and when you're comfortable for it, yeah, that might be a great thing for us to do. Thanks. David, what do you think now that we've gone all culty, as it were?
Makes sense why you put the talk on. Sounds like terrible people.
Yeah, it sucks. I mean, it has disintegrated in a way, but the damage is done.
Yeah, the leaders, the big leader has died, but the little leaders are still sort of holding the group together, from what I understand.
The minions, the loyal minions, yeah.
But one thing we know is that this will come around again.
As it always does.
Yeah.
In one form or another, yeah. I'm glad it makes sense to you, David. Thanks. Lavita.
A long time ago, about 15 or 20 years ago, I read somewhere, I don't remember where, but it was like, if you want to discover the strength of somebody's character, the depth of somebody's character, give them power. And I thought that was really profound. And as I have kept living, I've found it to be incredibly true. You can give somebody, like, you can make them a hall monitor and they'll turn into a monster, you know? Just a little bit of power and you get to see exactly where their weaknesses are and stuff, much less they're teaching something that affects people's lives. So, you know, if you see somebody abusing power, even in small amounts, you know not to trust them with money, children, spouses, anything.
That's a good point. Yeah. Thanks, Lavita. Zainab.
Yeah. So do these leaders practice and use the energy for work on their ego, or is it that, like, how do they get this amount of energy, I would say? Or
Yeah.
yeah.
From what I have seen, now there's a couple of different ways this can happen. In this particular case, I think that this woman who was running the group and her first husband, who was in the same group that Burton came out of, they both had the same teacher. I think they were frauds from the get-go. I think that they never had anything other than a will to power and an understanding that they could get a lot of control and a lot of money, and that's what they did. That's one way. There are people who are just con artists, and they take advantage of you, and we've seen that over and over again. Even more scary, though, and I will tell you that I had two very close friends who both became cult leaders under slightly different circumstances. And they both started out really good, but they couldn't let go of their egos, and it forced them to be less and less honest with themselves and less honest with their students, and then even less honest with themselves, until they became cult leaders without even noticing that it was happening. And that was a tragedy, because both of them started out as really good people and ended up creating things around themselves that were just absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah, I have an acquaintance who's kind of doing that dance with himself too. Like, I think they have aspirations to having, you know, the kind of power that comes with unethical manipulations and such. And it's really kind of scary because I care for them, but I cannot support that.
Yeah. And it's doubly scary because, I mean, here's a secret about me. Every day I get up and I check to see if I've become a cult leader. Because, like I said, these two people were, you know, Noor laughs, but my two friends had the best intentions in the world. And still they failed. So I work on learning from the mistakes of others. And I have a checklist that I go down every day going, am I doing this shit? Am I doing this shit? Sometimes I'll ask Noor, am I doing this shit?
Well, I mean, I think that's healthy for us to always be doing. Like, this is an organic process. This isn't just like, well, I guess I don't have to worry about that anymore. Like, this is an ongoing process, especially as our community is always like growing and evolving. Like, we are part of that system, and we need to make sure that the system stays healthy. And that is a group effort. That is primarily our responsibility, but it is a group effort. And it starts with us making sure that we check ourselves constantly, all the time, consistently.
Yeah. And I also rely on Noor and my own, like Cherie. I trust that if I ever get really weird, Cherie will tell me. I have no doubt about that at all. Because she isn't going to put up with that bullshit. She's been there. So
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Which is great. So, I mean, Aaron offers a thought. He says, in my experience, no power is needed to, you know, become a culty asshole, but it can make their monstrosity more apparent if they have power. And I mean, it depends on how you're defining power too, because there is such a thing as, oh my God, I'm trying to remember what Amy Cuddy calls it. It's like a healthy kind of power, which is not a zero-sum thing.
Yeah, there is due authority and undue authority. And we want to avoid undue authority over anyone.
Yeah.
Jefferson has a comment here too.
Yeah, I'll read that now too. Thanks, Aaron. Jefferson says, being that we were children once and our parents had that power, I believe so much is set up and modeled in the early conditioning with primary caregivers and the needs that are and are not met. Much of what plays out in cults seems to me to be in one way rooted in an attempt to get early authority and validation needs met, masked by ideologies and spiritual maze maps. So,
that's
I mean,
really true.
Amen to that. But I mean, I noticed this with Sufi teachers, right? Like, I'm actually writing an essay right now that soon I will be sharing, but it's kind of in development. But in any case, one of the things that came up for me is in Sufi traditions, I feel like if leaders aren't watching themselves and staying healthy in their leadership and all of that stuff, and if the quality of their students isn't that great, then you end up with this system in which you have this spiritual daddy figure who's meant to be the problem solver for you, who carries your burdens and who basically just absorbs all of your agency. And some people are into that. Some people want that for themselves. They want to submit to their spiritual daddy figure. And they want all of the trappings that go with that. They want the long beard on their daddy. They want him to wear a cool hat and sweet robes. And they want him to talk with certain language. Okay, there you got your beats.
Yep.
Very noisy.
Actually, I got my nuts.
Okay. But, namaste, Jayesh. Take care. Like, there's something very childish about that, both on the part of the leader and the students, in my opinion.
Yeah. And this is why we talk so much about the idea of human adulthood. In order to keep a bunch of people in a cult, you have to keep them in a neotenous state. Neoteny is the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. Adults do not hang out in cults. And so, where it is actually the job of a spiritual teacher to help the people who comes to them to grow into human adulthood, it is the actions of a cult leader to keep those people stunted to where they never reach adulthood, because human adults do not defer. No adult human being will defer to an authority figure just because they're an authority figure. And I think we have another question here, or a statement.
Rishabh has a remark or a question. Can we say that it is natural to go down the path of forming a cult once people reach a certain level of development or achieve a certain level of understanding? So let's touch on that first, because I think that's a question unto itself. Can we say, I want to read that again. Can we say that it is natural to go down the path of forming a cult once people reach a certain level of develop and or achieve a certain level of understanding?
I would say not a certain level of understanding, a certain level of skill. So, I can take you and teach you things about the human consciousness that you can use to manipulate people. And then, once you get good at that, if you have neglected your other studies, like how to develop a conscience, you are likely to go out and do that. And that's how you get cults. Cult leaders are as much children as their followers.
That is my point. Yeah.
And you can see that. Go watch The Deep End. Watch the cult leader in The Deep End and how she reacts to the people around her. She claims to have ultimate knowledge, but she reacts to the people around her like a spoiled 12-year-old.
So that's a documentary series that I think is on HBO.
Yeah, HBO, I think.
And if you can't get it that way, like...
You can buy it for a couple of bucks off of YouTube. That's what Palin did.
Okay, so...
yeah, got it. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, so I do want to touch on your second question. Does it take a special effort not to be a cult?
Yes.
Yeah. Because it is that's child behavior. So it is easier to be a cult than not be a cult.
And it is easier to be a cult leader than it is to be an adult human being. It is easier to remain a child than it is to develop conscience. It's hard to be an adult. Our cultures are not set up for it.
Right.
Okay. So hopefully those are useful answers to those good questions. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also, just FYI, I love that principle that this group is based on, like equality, horizontal and not like vertical. So that's really great.
Yeah. And it makes life easier for us because then we don't have to boss you around.
And yeah, I mean, we get to be more ourselves that way. That's one thing I've realized in all this. In that we don't have to... I think this is kind of... I want to touch on Aaron's comment because oh, wait. Rishabh, I just want to make sure you have the opportunity to finish your thought. Okay. Hopefully you're good. Oh wait, yeah.
I think I have a internet issue. Yeah, like your voice is cutting off. Did you say something to me?
It might be my microphone. I'm not sure. I just
We
wanted to
were
make sure.
trying to make sure that you have had the time to finish your thought, because we're really interested in what you have to say. You're asking really good questions and you're giving really good comments, and it is helpful to all of us. Somebody dropped off.
I think it might have been Aaron.
Okay.
He had a valuable thought. I don't know if he'll be able to come back, but I want to read it. It's interesting. This is from Aaron. It's interesting how there is an insistence among many that, quote, dressing the part, unquote, is necessary, when often the role shouldn't be considered a, quote, part, unquote, in my opinion anyway. I think this was in response to what we were talking about when I mentioned spiritual daddy figure who dresses a certain way and puts on certain airs in order to play the role of spiritual daddy.
Yep, Aaron's just come back.
And I say daddy because typically we're talking about a daddy figure.
Not anymore, because the last two cult figures that we've dealt with have both been women.
Of course. Yeah. The times are changing. So
yeah, we got as many
obviously,
spiritual mommies out there.
Yep. I'm not immune. I have to check myself before I wreck myself too. That's okay, Aaron. I just want to say we appreciated what you had to offer with the dressing the part remark. That was helpful. I'm just gonna mute you though. There's a lot of stuff going on over there.
Yeah, one of the rules of our tarika is to always dress in the manner of the land in which you are in.
I think there are fun, specific situations in which you can do something different. But
oh yeah, there are times when we're being very, very formal. If we were actually initiating somebody into the order, which is a whole different thing and has nothing to do with this per se, but if we were, we might be wearing the traditional robes of the order, because that's what you do. But there are people who are museum Sufis who walk around town wearing the big turbans and dressed like 19th century Turks and all of this kind of stuff, and they are no different than the guy who stands in the middle of a football field and makes prayers to God in an incredibly loud voice.
Yeah, it's like a look at me, pick me, God kind of thing.
Yeah, or look at how cool I am.
Yeah, or look at me, humans. I'm just so special. So all of that is part and parcel of what we're talking about this evening.
Yep.
Really.
And all of this that we're talking about is designed to help you keep your ego in check, so that you can become an adult human being, which is, I think personally, even better than enlightenment. Because you get to still run around and stuff. You don't have to sit on a mountain somewhere and eat mush.
We're not asking you to do that. We don't even really do that.
We don't even remotely do that. I hate mush.
All right, so Jefferson says, cults tend to draw the perspective of calling members victims, not to mention being taboo. While real harm can and does happen, what would you say of the choice of the member to join or follow, no matter how masterful the persuasion, and its implication on that individual's journey?
Cults look for people who actually want to grow and evolve, but haven't developed the discernment yet to smell the bullshit when they encounter it. The people I know who have been deeply involved in cults were all really good people. They just got hooked in, and instead of being given the tools that they needed to grow themselves, to evolve, they were given tools to help them stay in one place.
And these are, I mean, they're good people, they're intelligent people. Like the guy that wrote the book that we're talking about this evening is like a
He's a high-powered New
fancy New
York
York
attorney.
lawyer. Yeah, like he's not a fool. And yet there's still this vulnerability that...
Yeah. And that is not the student's fault. I completely deny the idea that the students are at fault here, because it is the teacher's duty to teach the student. And this is something I got from my teachers, and I hold it to be axiomatic. If a student is not learning, it's the teacher's fault. It's not the student's fault. It's never the student's fault, because the student doesn't know. You know, if the student knew, they could teach themselves, but they don't. So if somebody comes to me and I feed them a line of bullshit, that's not on them, that's on me. And I think we need to remember that with every person who comes out of a cult, whether it's the Hare Krishnas or the U.S. Congress, that, you know, when they were drawn into it, it was because they were well motivated. They didn't, I mean, maybe you're going to find a psychopath somewhere who looks at a school and goes, I want to do that because I want to be the teacher, because then I can play with all of these people. You might find that. But mostly it's people who want to do good. With my two friends, I know that they wanted to do good. But when it came to let go of certain parts of their ego, they just couldn't do it.
I'll just, can I,
Yeah.
oh,
Please, go ahead.
At the risk of exposing, you know, stuff in my own ego, one of the odd things about the subject that we're talking about is that to never have been in a cultic relationship tends to set up, it can set up well, it's an experiential, you know, there's something experiential or empirical that is not, that there's like a line. Let's, you know, there's people who have had the experience and people that haven't, let's say. And so I think part of me wants to speak the reason I asked that question was because not in any way to try to say that there are no victims, but in really, I mean, the group that I was a part of had incredible truths. It's just that the truths were in service. And cult is part of culture, you know, in terms of the language, right? And at least speaks about cultivation. And I absolutely think that childhood, you know, contextually, childhood is perpetually, you know, it's perpetual childhood. And for me, the opportunity that I was afforded to have the false version of myself, the opportunity to burn down after, because for me, the whole group fell apart, what I was part of, the whole thing disintegrated. And that process afterwards was just between what, I'm going to flippantly use the term, it was a remembering of self. And I don't mean in any way it was any of that practice. But that to me made all, like in hindsight, all of these things became, you know, pains became joys, or problems became learnings. So I don't know. I just wanted to speak to that, you know, the experience of, because to me, cult is not a noun. It's a verb. It's
And
a
that's
verb.
a wise thing, yes.
Yeah.
And it's got so much taboo on it. You know, people tend to say, oh, you know, in the back of the mind, it's like, oh, you poor fool. I'm so sorry for you. And that's reasonable when there's harm for that harm. However, I also think that there's great opportunity in what remains. But.
Yeah, and you know, it may be, and this is just a suggestion, but it may be incumbent upon you to write out your story in some way. It sounds like you underwent some really tough stuff and you grew from it, and that's the kind of stories that the world needs right now. So, just a thought, drop it in the back of your head.
And that's really enriching stuff. So I think
Yeah.
that's something that we are all observing and learning from as we hear it, for sure.
Yeah, and I can't disagree with you. And
I mean,
as
I
Noor
sure
will tell
don't.
you, I'll disagree with anything if I can. I love to argue, but I can't argue with any of that. I think that you're making very valid points. And, you know, from the point of view of helping people who really want to grow find their ways to places that can help them rather than prey on them, this is the kind of information that needs to be there.
Whew. All right.
So we have lathered on
Yeah, I
past
want to just
our thing.
get through Levita, and Rashab has a Gurdjieff question that maybe we have time to touch on. Aaron says, I like to use the... this is relevant to our just now discussion, so I want to touch on that. Aaron says, I like to use the term enfranchisement for myself when thinking of culty indoctrination. It has a bit more subtlety to it for me. That is interesting. I'm curious to hear more about what you might mean by enfranchisement as you use it. I wonder if that might be important to save for a future discussion.
Yeah, that sounds like something that I would want to talk about for an hour or so.
Infant. Yes, I may have misread it, but I'll get back to that in the chat. Levita says, when a child becomes an adult, it makes the adult's life easier because the adult doesn't have to carry the burden of adulthood for the child anymore. Food, shelter, clothing, protection, etc., if that makes sense. Power to me isn't worth this burden.
Good point. And when a child becomes an adult, instead of having a charge, you have a friend. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Still like the old thing. Enlightened guys go around trying to help create more enlightened guys so that they have somebody not to talk to.
Sit and not talk to. To sit with and not talk to, yes.
Yeah. So we have the Gurdjieff question.
All right, so Rishabh's question is, in Gurdjieff's terms, can we call the people who have a wrong magnetic center or no magnetic center being involved in cults?
You could, with some of them. I like to avoid the tendency to overgeneralize.
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly kind of a thing that's happening these days.
Yeah. I would rather point out that genuine cult leaders fall into what Gurdjieff called Hasmonas people. I did a talk on that a while back. It's a weird idea, but it's worth thinking about. It's a kind of person who basically creates chaos so that they can then control the chaos and thrive off of it and steal energy from it.
I'm trying to remember how we spell that word. But I know the one you're talking about, unfortunately. Yeah.
Mushtaq, can you,
Yes.
in future time, spend more time about Hasnamus and the categories? I think a lot of people are Hasnamus, but there are a lot of differentiation, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. There are degrees of that from, say, somebody like Donald Trump, who creates worldwide chaos, to your obnoxious neighbor down the street who just lets his dog shit in your yard all the time.
Okay, so Rishabh specifies like a wrongly crystallized person, like ego crystallization.
Of a particular kind. People who are deeply this kind of person always have chaos around them. And when you watch their behavior, you see that they're actually creating the chaos. And then they thrive off of it.
You
Are
can see
these
that in the
people with,
deep end.
Yeah.
are these people with very severe personality disorders?
Some of them. I mean, there is one guy I know who I would have diagnosed as an antisocial personality disorder. There's another guy who was a flat out psychopath and just loved to have that chaos around him. He would start fights just to watch them happen. Neither of these guys were spiritual teachers, thank God. But yeah, it's a weird situation. It's something that we should probably talk about more at some point.
I made a
And
note, yeah.
yeah, so wrongly crystallized in a particular way.
Whew, we've covered a lot of bases, yeah.
Yeah.
And again, with this topic, self-remembering, the combination, how does these people who become Hasnamus, how do they remember their self, or is it they remember an aspect of their personality?
In my experience, they don't remember themselves. They live in a kind of internal world where they attempt to impinge that world onto reality, to make it fit. But it's all having something to do with an internal story. That's a very gross generalization too, but in the people like this I've encountered, that seems pretty common. But like I said, this is something that we could devote at least an hour talking
Yeah.
about.
I have thoughts developing already about
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Good. So, if there are no more pressing questions, I am going to stop this because we've gone a very long time.
Sorry.
I was hoping to get this done in an hour, and I was lying to myself.
I think this just got, like, juicier than we expected it to, which is great.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch over to Brady Bunch mode. There we are. And so say goodbye, folks.
Yep, wave to everyone here, everyone watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. Happy to have you, and we will see you next time.